everyone. Welcome to today's workshop, Fast Track to Podcasting. So I hope you guys all have your breakfast. Have you? Let us know in the comments below to know. Okay, so I think before we begin, let me just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Raven, from one of the co-organizers for the Asian Podcast Festival. So I'll be one of your co-hosts for today. So before we get into the Fast Track to Podcasting workshop, I'd just like to do a really quick introduction about the Asian Podcast Festivals and ourselves, and also Kelvin as well. So this is our second year since its inaugural launch in 2019. The Asia Podcast Festival is a celebration and recognition of podcast excellence in Asia. It brings together the best in the industry and provides a sandbox for emerging talents to grow and experiment. Next. Okay, so the festival is co-organized by Creators at Work and Vox Live. So just a quick intro about Creators at Work. Is a media agency subcharged by a curated network of freelance media professionals who cover every consumer touchpoint, including digital, social, mobile, broadcast, print, events, and out of home. And they are also supercharged by a curated network of freelance media professionals who cover every kind of creative outputs you can think of. So via Vox Live, we give content creators an audio advantage to stand out in the podcast crowd. We help aspiring podcasters to reduce time to launch, increase your listenership, build a sustainable podcast, all within your budget. We also run events for podcasters as well, such as this Asian Podcast Festival. Okay, so there are 4 pillars for our Asian Podcast Festival, be it the Pop Lab, which is a series of workshops and masterclasses, the awards, which is the competition for recognition of excellence of Asian podcasters, the conference itself, and the marketplace. So just to quickly run through the awards. So the Asian Podcast Awards celebrates the best in Asian podcasting by creating a platform to recognize and honor the members of the Asian podcasting community. So, and we will empower Asian voices and share our stories and diversity with the rest of the world. So I strongly encourage you, next slide. I strongly encourage you guys to take part as well. Okay, and next. Okay, so what are the criteria? It's open to all Asian podcasters, whether you're based here or based abroad. So the entries are, what makes us special is that our entries are open in all languages. So it's not just, like I think majority of the podcast competitions out there in the world are mainly in the English or Spanish language. We are the only award that's open to all Asian languages, be it English, Bahasa, Mandarin, Tamil, Hindi, you name it. If you can submit your podcast in any language, and we'll find a way to judge your content. So they have to be active in 2021. So if you start one a few years ago and it's not active now, you're probably not eligible. And the deadline is 21st of November. Next. Okay, next slide. So there are 6 categories. So we have the podcast of the year, the host of the year, the best comedy and entertainment and lifestyle podcast, best science, tech, business podcast, best narrative storytelling podcast, best art, society, and culture podcast. Okay, next. Okay, so for more information about more podcast workshops or the awards, the conference, we'll be releasing the lineup of speakers probably early next week. And the marketplace itself, go to the asiapodcastfestival.com. Okay, next. Okay, so I guess this is the more interesting part, right? Where I finally get to introduce Kelvin for today. Hi, Kelvin.
Hello,
Thanks
everybody.
for joining us all the way from Malaysia.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, just a quick introduction about Kelvin himself. So he's the founder and chief operations of Renegade Radio and Renegade Plus, Malaysia's premier podcast network and home to many and proudly Malaysian podcasts. So he has overseen creation of multiple podcasts from two book nerds talking, podcast sessions Malaysia, the Kita podcast, and many more. So I'll now pass the mic over to Kevin for him to introduce himself further and also to conduct the workshop. All yours, Kevin. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope you guys are ready for this very interesting, it's kind of biased for me to say interesting, but very interesting workshop that I'm going to be conducting. Guys, do I share my screen now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Anytime. Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. Just let me quickly share my screen.
Yeah.
Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. So on my segment of this workshop, I will be guiding everyone here since I see a couple of first timers here in the chat. Hold on, just let me bring the chat higher. Okay, so I see a couple of first timers in the chat, and in essence itself, what my workshop will guide you is to help you understand what a podcast is, to help you conceptualize from idea to podcast, and basically guide you on what you need to start your very own podcast, basically fast track to podcasting. So thank you, Raven, for introducing me. This is me. I am Kelvin Tay. I am the founder of Renegade Radio, which, well, I'm proud to say that we are Malaysia's very first podcasting network. On the top two on the top two pictures, you see two of my own podcasts that I host personally. The first one is Podcast Sessions Malaysia. It's very meta. It's a podcast about Malaysian podcasts and podcasters. The second one is my personal podcast called Epic Arcade, which I talk about video games. And on the bottom are just 4 of many podcasts that I have overseen, built, and produced as of now. So this is just a little about me. And throughout the workshop itself, I will be using about an hour and a half just to introduce podcasting, the concept of podcasting to everyone here. I will take about an hour to run a workshop with everyone here, or I'll just pick some ideas from the chat or from the audiences to idealize and conceptualize any ideas that you have into a podcast. Basically just showing you how I normally run my consultation with other podcasters on creating their very own podcast. And to close it off, I'll use about half an hour for Q&A. All right. So to all the audiences out here, just a very quick one. In that hour and a half that I'll be using to introduce the podcast, there will be some slides where I will guide you on how to basically think of what kind of podcast you need. How do you start a podcast? What kind of equipments you need? And throughout my segment, I want you to take out a pen or a paper or just open your notepad software and just start to jot down ideas that you have throughout my segment. Okay? So during the workshop itself, I can run you through your ideas and kind of show everyone how easy it is to start a podcast. So yeah, here we go. Okay. One of the biggest questions that I have from people around me is, what is a podcast? And I always find it interesting because I have been in this industry for about 4 years now. I think next year, January, will make it 4 years now. But I've been listening to podcasts easily for close to a decade now. And my very first podcast is like Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast. And when I first started listening to podcasts, a lot of people are like, what are you listening to? I was like, yeah, it's a podcast. How hard is it to understand what a podcast is? And I don't know about everyone from Singapore, but in Malaysia, it's still not a norm. It's still not something that you see a lot of people listen to, because from the conversation, just from my close friends itself, podcast is a very foreign medium for them. They usually go for like traditional radio when they are driving. They are usually on YouTube or like every other medium besides podcasts. So what I like to explain to people, what is the podcast? It's very simple. It's a on-demand radio that you can listen to anywhere, whenever you want. You're in a car, you're commuting on a train, on a bus, you are having a road trip, you are sad, listen to a podcast. There's so many types of podcasts out there that even though if you don't know what to listen to, there's definitely a topic, a hobby, a podcast out there for you. So if you look at the picture on the top left, that's a very generic way of recording a podcast. It's just two-person talking about a topic, and that topic can be anything. That scared me. and if you look at the bottom picture, the Epic Arcade one, it's where you can usually find podcasts, and that is an example from Spotify. And the bottom four icon, it's Podchaser, iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It's what we call Podchaser applications. It's an aggregated software where you can find millions, like literally millions of podcasts and contents out there. So podcast to me is these three circles here. For me, podcast is very entertaining. For me, podcast is where I gain a lot. Me is community, mainly because there are people who listen to podcasts mainly to learn something. Like recently, I've been very into crypto and NFT. And when I'm driving, I usually just pop in a NFT or crypto based podcast and just listen to it and just learn as I drive. Or sometimes even if I'm just having my downtime unwinding, I tend to listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, true crime horror podcasts, and that's the entertainment value for me. I see Yinling nodding here, yeah, and community. And this is the biggest factor for me, because if I didn't have started my very own podcast, or like my podcasting network, for example, I wouldn't be here explaining to you my journey. I wouldn't have the chance to actually be invited by Raven or Yinling to come to the Asia Podcast Festival to tell you a story of my journey and how you can start your very own journey as well. So entertainment, knowledge, and community is what it means to me to be a podcaster. And it might be different for you as well. So throughout this segment, we will just slowly find what is a podcast for you. Okay, this is also a very big question mark that everyone asks me, like, how is it different from radio? And again, I'm using the Malaysian examples here. So if you guys don't understand, if I rojak my language, like mix English or Bahasa, for example, just ping me on the chat. I have the chat here. I can read it. Okay. So how is podcast different from radio? Very quick question for everyone here. You can just put yes or no on the chat. Do you still listen to traditional radio in Singapore? A very simple question. Yes or no? See, only in cars, yes, no, not really. See, and this is also the same answer that I get from people in Malaysia as well. So for those people who answer no, I'm assuming you have moved on to other mediums like Spotify. You can listen to music or other podcasts or other form of entertainment, for example, when you're commuting or doing something else, right? Yeah, Spotify users, says Victor. And that's okay. Spotify user, yeah. Caleb says yes. Magana says music usually. Yeah, see, so the consensus of how people consume media, especially in 2021, moving to 2022, is very different from how people traditionally consume entertainment, for example. Again, going back to my question, how is it different from radio? Okay. Radio, again, I don't know how radio is like radio content is like in Singapore, but in Malaysia, we get a lot of slapstick comedy. We get a lot of prank calls. You get that same 20 song on the playlist that you hear again and again to the point that you're like, what am I listening to anymore? Right. And I can't remember the last time I tuned into radio in Malaysia and actually learn something that is valuable. It's like, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. Or like things like, yeah, things that are interesting, things that kind of enlighten me. I don't know if you guys feel how I feel, but that's generally how, sorry. And that's generally how I feel. So how is it different? Podcasting is free most of the time. Podcasting is on demand all the time, meaning you can listen to it anywhere. If you're an astronaut, you're on the ISS, you still can listen to the podcast. If you're out of Singapore, you can listen to podcasts. If you're in your toilet, you can listen to podcasts. You can literally listen to podcasts anywhere, anytime on your schedule, right? Podcast is niche. I will touch on this later on. And a podcast is basically a radio show that you can bring anywhere and listen to it anytime. But this is what I love most about podcasts from my own experience. It can be any length, meaning that if you want to start a podcast to just record an episode once every day to just say, hi, how are you? And publish it, you can. You know, if you want to talk about your family tree for like an hour, 5 hours, 10 hours, you can. No one is stopping you. And that's one of the reasons why I love podcasting. It can be any length, anytime, okay? Any frequency. If you are a working adult and you have no time to record your own podcast, you can do it once a month. If you want to do it once a day, sure, no one's stopping you. If you want to publish a podcast once a week, again, no one is stopping you, okay? Any format. So this is quite interesting because, again, in Malaysia, radio is governed by MCMC, which is the communications government here. And if you are on radio, there are a lot of red tapes that you can't cross. There's a lot of limitations that you cannot do on air, for example. And that's where podcasting comes in. I've heard podcasts that talks about murder cases, podcasts that talks about true crime, podcast that does sex education, which we don't really get in Malaysia, podcasts that you can swear on. You know, there's some podcasts that I listen to, my own as well, that is an hour long, and throughout that entire hour is just explicit content about, you know, anything that you can think of. So this is why I love podcasting. You have the freedom to create the dream show that you want. I'm assuming everyone here have their favorite YouTubers. Let's not even touch on podcasters. Let's just touch on YouTube for a while. Everyone have their favorite YouTuber. And if you look at how those YouTubers have their own show, have their own personality, how they captivate you with their content, you can do that basically with a podcast as well, but without the video. I will touch on the video part later on, but yeah, this is generally why I love podcasting. All right, you have the freedom to create any content, whatever you think of. The only limitation, what I always tell people is, the only limitation for your podcast is your creativity. That's all. So this is the podcasting landscape for me. One of the reasons why I love doing podcasts is the people that I've met. You know, people like Yenling, Raven, and all my other local Malaysian colleagues out here. You get to meet a lot of very interesting people that you never thought that you can be friends with. And I can comfortably tell you that you can also, well, fingers crossed, meet your idols sometimes. For example, when I was growing up in high school, I listened to a local radio station called BFM, which is Business FM. And they are two hosts that I really enjoy. Their names are Ezra Zaid and Richard Bradbury. And when I started my podcast, I actually got them to be on my show. And that was actually a very huge milestone for me. People that you grew up listening to, people who inspired you. I had the chance to meet and speak to these people, and it was just a mind-blowing experience. You can connect with a lot of people from different industries, different experts, and so many pockets of life that you never thought that you could touch. And when it comes to the community, well, Renegade Radio have their own community called the Malaysian Podcasters Community. And I think in Singapore, you guys have the Podcast Collective, which is run by Mevox. So these are the communities that you can usually find online. And if I'm not mistaken, the Malaysian Podcasters Community and also the Podcast Collective, you can find them on Facebook, right, Raven? Right, on Facebook. And what happens in this community is basically, it's a hive mind of local podcasters sharing their ideas, sharing new episodes, just basically sharing a collective of podcast information that you can just go use the search bar. Any questions that you have as a novice podcaster, you can find the answer there usually, right? Even if you can't find the answer, you can always just put it on, just post a question, and more often than not, a lot of podcasters will come in and help you out with, hey, you have this problem. Oh yeah, yeah, Raven said there is one more Facebook group from Singapore called Podcast SG. Yeah, so yeah, there are a lot of communities out there that kind of do podcasting content as well. All you have to do is find them. So these are the people of podcasting. Like I mentioned to you, Straight Date Center Esssentials, one of the people that really inspired me to start where Renegade Radio is today. And the rest of the shows here are people that I've spoken to. And if I don't have a podcast, I don't think I would ever have the chance to connect with so many wonderful podcasters that not only taught me how to move my content further, but also inspires me to do very crazy content. Some of the podcasts here, for example, Take a Bow podcast. It's run by this podcaster called Lo Yi-jun. Take a Bow is basically a podcast about food. And it's not a conversation-based podcast. It's a storytelling, narrative-based podcast about food that you can find in Malaysia. And he would interview all these very interesting industry leaders from the food industry, from like durian plantation owner, Michelin star chef, and so many other colorful individuals. And he will bring you through a story of what is this food, how it started, and where is it now, or where is it going. Pendulum Show, for example, it's a local Malaysian podcast about politics that I personally like because I feel like they're on the fences, meaning that they're not left-leaning or right-leaning. They have the facts and they tell you the facts. Very straightforward. Her Do It, for example, it's a personal finance podcast that I follow. Their Instagram is crazy. Their community is crazy as well. And just a couple more, Rumah Roy podcast, Seek to Speak podcast, very amazing people. So what I'm trying to say here is when you have your own podcast, it kind of gives you a backstage VIP pass because you can always just reach out to people. It's like, hey, I have this podcast that talks about XYZ. And I really love your opinion. And I hope that you can be a part of my podcast or be a guest on my podcast. More often than not, I don't think anyone has ever rejected us to be a guest on the show. And I'm quite grateful for that. But yeah, it's basically a backstage pass where you can have a lot of very interesting people or character on your show just to share their ideas, their thoughts, their journey, their experiences. And yeah, and that's a lot of us out here, man. Okay. To level up with podcasts. Remember when I was saying earlier that in my journey, I've learned a lot of things. And I was just thinking a couple of days back, like, what have I actually learned from podcasting? And I kind of highlighted or pinpoint these 4 points. All right. Management, communication, creative and critical thinking, and niche technical know-how. And I had this conversation with Raven a couple of days back. A lot of people tend to say, it's like, hey, bro, start a podcast only, what's so hard? Just talk behind the mic, what's so hard about starting a podcast? But if anyone here have started a podcast will actually understand what I'm trying to say, it's actually very freaking hard to start a podcast. All right. Not only is this like, hey bro, talk behind the mic, what's so hard lah, Okay, now once you're behind the mic, what's next? How are you going to plan your show? How are you going to plan your episode? What are you going to talk about on your episode? Do you want anyone on your podcast? Do you want a co-host? And there's a whole script of questions that you can ask yourself to the point that you're like, it's actually not that easy to start a podcast. So let's start with management, for example. All right. These are the four pillars of soft skills that I've personally gained the most from when I started my first show. Management. To start a podcast, you need to start managing your podcast. And I'm not talking about, you do this, you do that. It's planning what your podcast revolves around. Once you have that, what kind of episodes do you want to create? What kind of podcast do you want to create? Okay, once that's done, how do you manage your equipments? How do you start managing yourself as a host to convey the message you want? And then at the end, it goes on, how do I upload my episodes? How do I edit my episode? How do I market my episode? So on, so forth. That's the managing pillar. The second pillar, communications. I don't know how many of you here actually really know this or have experienced it. For the past how long? For the past half an hour that I've been talking, I have a severe stuttering issue. And when I speak, I stutter a lot, even on the podcast. But for the past 3-4 years of my journey as a podcaster, it has helped me a lot. It taught me how to slow down my thoughts. It taught me how to slow down my speech. And it taught me how to, well, I don't know the term for it, but what I call is like layer my volume. How do I use what volume to talk to host what kind of podcast that I want? Okay. And I think me and Raven also have this conversation where we both agree that we are terrible introverts and we feel very uncomfortable in front of people, telling people like, oh, I'm the best, I'm a podcaster, blah, blah, blah. I can talk all day, all night, and that's a huge challenge for me because it takes a lot of energy for me to communicate with people. And my anxiety doesn't help as well. And this pillar of communication helped me tremendously because before the show, I was telling the organizers that I am so, what was the word I used again? So kanchong, so anxious to be working on a workshop at this level. And running a podcast has taught me to communicate better and just going back to the management pillar, manage myself a lot better and how I talk to people or a group of people. The next pillar would be creative and critical thinking. This is where content creation comes in. Okay, you have your podcast out. You have everything planned out, your ideal audiences, everything is all planned out. Now, how do you convey what you want to say to your audiences? And how do you make that how do you turn that into value and takeaway for your audiences to bring home? If you have a conversation podcast, anything is a conversation. If I'm talking to a Grab driver, that's a conversation. If I'm at a mamak with my friends talking, that's a conversation. But how I always see that is that those are empty conversations. If let's say I have a very high ranked or guest on my show, how can I turn that into value, into knowledge, into education for my audiences, for them to learn what they can from this guest, for example? You have to be very creative on how you craft your questions. You have to be very critical on how you want to angle your story. And that's one of the biggest pillars I've learned as well. And when it comes to the last pillar, which is niche technical know-how, I think a lot of podcasters struggle with this because niche technical know-how, what I'm trying to pinpoint here is your post-production, basically production in general. What kind of equipments do you need to run a podcast? If you have four co-hosts or like 3 co-hosts and 1 guest, what is your setup going to be like? Do I use a dynamic mic? Do I use a condenser mic? What kind of interface do I need? What kind of excuse me, what kind of DAW do I need to edit my podcast? Don't worry if you don't know any answer to the question that I just asked you. I'll be talking to it at the last few segments of my workshop. So yeah, these are the 4 major pillars that I've gained through my journey as a podcaster. Yeah, hold on. Okay, wait. Before we go to the next slide, is there any questions we have so far that you guys are struggling to understand or anything? Whenever I mention something that you guys don't understand, you can just put a question on the chat box. I think the organizers will just jot it down, and during the Q&A, we can actually bring it up. Okay, guys? I'm going to assume it's okay. So going to the next one. Oh, thank you, Marcus. Okay, going to yes, Joey Joey Chan, in the last half an hour of the workshop, that there will be a Q&A. Okay. Anyways, going back to my slides. This is the creativity part of how you can start your podcast. And from this slide onwards, what I want you guys to do is, as I'm explaining or as I'm breaking down the concept of starting your podcast or idealizing your podcast, I want you to take out a pen and paper, or you can just jot it down on like a digital note. Start picturing the podcast that you want to have. If looking at how a lot of people here are first timers in an event like this, I want you to start jotting down the idea of your ideal podcast, right? And as I'm explaining to you, I want you to expand that idea you have. And later in the workshop, I really want to just work with you on your idea and see and just show you how easy it is to start a podcast. Okay? So starting with niche. A lot of people will tell you, it's like, dude, if you want to start your own podcast, you have to find your niche. You have to find your niche. And using the word niche, I feel it's a very vague concept because anything can be a niche. And that's exactly it. So if you look at the 3 images on the right, that is 3 podcasts that I listened to as well. And that is my definition of what a niche is. Starting with the Pen Addict. Can anyone, like just reading the name itself, without looking into the show, can someone tell me what the Pen Addict is about? Like just judging by the name. Can someone just guess? Writers
Is it
or
about
writing?
literature?
No, yeah, it's what Nicholas said. It's a podcast about pen. It's 2 hosts.
Literally.
Yeah, it's 2 hosts that goes around the United States and the UK and find rare pens, and they will review the pen as they are writing. They will talk about the design of the pen and give you a bit of history of why this pen is so unique. You know, and that's a niche. Okay. Second example, everything is alive. Again, same question to the audiences out there. Without looking into it, just everything is alive. What can you just take a guess on what this podcast is about? No one? No takers? So everything is alive is one of my favorite podcasts out there. And this is the kind of podcast, if you are out here to basically plan to start a storytelling podcast or a narrative-based podcast, you have to learn from Everything is Alive. Why? I'm glad you asked why. So Everything is Alive is a podcast that interviews inanimate objects. They have one episode that talks about, they have one episode that interviews a Coca-Cola can. They have one interview that talks to a set of Russian dolls. There's an interview with a baseball cap. And all those people that the host is interviewing are very popular or upcoming American stand-up comedians. And they will tell them to imitate an object. And they have to tell a story as the object. You know, what have you seen in your lifetime as a ball cap? What is the worst thing you have experienced as a Coca-Cola can? You know, what is the most terrible things that you have been through as a light post? And I find that crazy because remember when I told you like the only limitation is your creativity earlier in a few slides? This is what I mean. If you want to start a podcast, it can literally be a podcast about anything. And the final example I'm going to give you is this, also, again, one of my top 10 podcasts, I would say, by Matt Gurley. It's a podcast called I Was There Too. And this is a podcast about cinema. It's a podcast about movies. But it's not what you think. They don't interview AAA stars. They don't interview any stars. It's a podcast that interviews the extras on the movie set. That's why it's called I Was There Too. And it's And what the podcast revolves around is to ask those extras in the movie set, how was their experience like in this AAA film that earned like a few $1 million? You know, what was your experience like working with the director? What was your experience like if you encountered the AAA star, for example? And these are just some of the examples of niche podcasts that are my personal favorite that I really want to share with you guys. Because when it comes to a podcast, you can start a podcast that talks about anything. You know, I even had a conversation with Raven. Can I mention NSFW things?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have had a couple of conversations with people who came out to me and it's like, hey dude, I want to start a podcast that reviews about porn. And I'm like, what? Why? Why are you telling me that? You know, and there's actually podcasts out there that talks about these kind of things. So what I'm trying to tell you is, if you want to start a podcast, there is no limitation. If you like anime, if you like music, if you like films, try to dive deeper into what you can talk about in those topics. Because films, music, gaming, for example, are too general. If you can dive a bit deeper and do a bit more research of a topic that not many people know about, or you can just create a completely fictional setting, a new world, there's people who's definitely going to listen to it. A lot of people don't like it when I say podcasting is intimate, but I stay true to it. I feel that podcasting is one of the most intimate, excuse me, podcasting is one of the most intimate mediums that people can experience. Why? Because if you listen to a podcast, it's just you and the host, or you and the host and the co-host and the guest, for example. A lot of people have came out to me and like, hey Kel, this is the first time meeting you, but I think that I've been friends with you for a very long time, because they listen to my podcast. And Epic Arcade is a podcast where I tell my co-host Afik that I want the setting to be like a couch conversation. It's just two friends sitting on the couch playing video games, and we're talking about the latest video games news. We're doing game review as if we're sitting on the couch next to each other. And the audience is literally in between the both of us. They're just eavesdropping to the conversation. And that's when that fan came out and told me that. It's like, hey, I don't really know you guys, but I feel like I know you guys. It really made me feel like, oh, wow, okay, that's actually quite impactful, because that's the idea I revolve my podcast around. Okay. And more often than not, podcasting, going back to being intimate, not in the sexual way, please, get your head out of the gutter. It's the friendly, intimate way where you don't know this person. This person can be oceans away from you, but you have listened to them for years on end. Like I've been listening to Bill Burr for about 5 years now, and I feel like he's my bestest friend, but I've never met him before, you know? And it's that experience you want to create for your audiences out there as well. Yeah, like I'm sorry, I'm going to botch your name, Kayen Chin, I think. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's very personal. It's a one-to-one conversation if it's just a single host. But if it's like multiple hosts, it just feels like you're eavesdropping and you feel bad about it, but not really. And I really hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say here, you know, because to me, podcasting is very intimate. So these 4 pictures here are some of the contents that I've done for my podcast called Podcast Sessions Malaysia. Very quickly, it's a podcast about Malaysian podcasters and their journey. Every episode is different. You know, reason being is because every episode you have a new guest, or I have new guests. And everyone, in my opinion, is a protagonist in their own life. We're just revolved in a world of protagonists. So every episode is different. You know, on the top left, I have Arnold Low and Lucas Lau, amazing people. They were people that I don't know. When they came into the Renegade studio for the first time, we talked as if we have been friends for a decade. And that's how amazing the conversation is. The Pendulum Boys, same thing. When they came into the studio, It was awkward for the first 5-10 minutes, but after the ice-breaking session, the conversation flow as if we have been friends for a long time. You know, same goes for Jasmine King, same goes for Risk, a personal friend of mine. And when you start a podcast, you know, besides the niches, besides the intimacy, it's your podcast. The amount of content that you can create is again limited to your creativity, right? If you have an interview-based podcast, every episode is going to be different because every guest you have lived their own life and have their own interesting story to tell. You know, it all depends to you on how you want to pick their brains, how do you want to angle the story, and how you want to leave your audience with that big question mark at the end of the episode. It's like, wow, this is something that I've never thought before. I'm going to think about it now, right? It's just giving back value to your audiences out there. And one of the biggest advice that is very true and dear to me was given to me by Lucas Lau, that gentleman in the green hat on the top left, is if you have created a podcast and you're not having fun doing it, what's the point of you starting a podcast in the first place? Because if you go into the podcast industry thinking that like, oh, I'm going to make my first million in the first month, first year, you know, I'm going to be so chill. Oh no, wait, no, not chill. Sorry, let me just rewind a bit. If you go into the podcast industry thinking that you'll become a millionaire at the end of the day, I would definitely tell you that you're in the wrong industry. Because a lot of us here, yes, we are trying to make it a 9-to-5 career. We want to make podcasts our day-to-day. But to be very frank with you guys, it's not that easy, just like YouTube, for example, right? But at the end of the day, it always goes back to why you want to start a podcast, how you want to do it, and are you actually having fun doing it? If you're not having fun, it's just going to be dreadful. And once you start having that thought that it's like, oh, you know, I'm going to record my own podcast, I'm going to start my own podcast, it's like, don't want to lazy already lah. No, I'm not having fun anymore. Then there's no point. Your podcast is what we call here, it will be pod faded. And I'll explain more about pod fading later on in the slides. But yeah, that's basically it. When you have your own podcast, the amount of episodes that you can churn out, very easy. It depends on how you want to craft your story and what kind of guests you have on the show. Now, this is back in March, the Renegade radio team and our friend Ain Isa from the Sick to Speak podcast have done a very similar talk like this to a local university called Help University. And this is back in March. Okay, we had to find some statistics on the amount of podcasts that are available in the podcast index back then, which is March, right? Q1 2021. And that's not the number there. The first number you see, 2.4 million podcasts that are in the podcasting index internationally, right? In 3 days, you can see there's 82K, 10 days, 186. But that just shows you how many podcasts are being pushed out every day. Okay, remember the number again. Okay, in March 2021, we have 2.4 million podcasts that are in the podcasting index. Now, not last week, 2 days ago, I found the same stats again. Okay, from the podcastindex.org. This is the number. 4.3 million in less than a year. That is almost double the amount of podcasts you see back in March, right? And this kind of shows you that how fast the industry is picking up, especially in Asia, because I would say in countries like Australia, UK, US, it's quite a mature medium. But in Asia, it's still picking up, and it's picking up super, super, super fast. And yeah, the data actually speaks for itself. Again, back in March, 2.4 million. In November, this quarter itself, it's 4.3, almost double the number, right? Now, I talked about pod fading. Let me explain to you what does pod fading means, okay? Wait. Before I explain to you what pod fading means, and anyone wants to take a gander on what does pod fading actually means? Nobody? Okay, fine. Okay. So this is okay. Before I go to pot fading, let me very quickly explain to you what this pyramid actually means. Whenever people start a podcast, I always tell them, don't worry about your 10th episode. Don't worry about your 15th episode. Start with 4 episodes. Do it for 1 month straight. Try to plan your podcast. Try to record your podcast. Try to edit your podcast for 4 weeks, given that if you release a podcast every week. Okay. At the end of the 4th week, come back and evaluate yourself. Is this something that I can do full time? Is this something that I can do long term? Is this something that I actually enjoy? Do I enjoy crafting a story? Do I enjoy being a host? Do I enjoy post production? And I'm giving this example for everyone out there who are solo podcasters, podcasts like a one man in a van kind of podcast, like you do everything by yourself. Okay. So try 4 episodes. And if your answer is yes, by the end of the 4th episode, yes, I want to continue my podcast, congratulations. You are part of that 36%, that black color part there, who people who have produced more than 10 episodes out there. So pod fading is a lot of people have published just 1 episode. And after that 1 episode, they just kind of went bye-bye. It's like, hey, bro, where you? You don't know where they went. Socials are dead. Twitter dead, Instagram dead. There's nothing new on the feed for like the past 6 months. All right. That's pod faded. 37%, which is 1.26 million of podcasters, 2 episodes, gone. Okay. And 3 or fewer than that also gone. That's why we always tell people, if you really want to start a podcast, really go all out. Go all out for that 4 episode. Start with episode 1, your pilot episode. Plan, record, publish, get feedback. Get the feedback, fix your episode 2. How can I be better? Same goes for episode 3, same goes for episode 4. In short, 4 episodes, just go all out for 4 episodes and see if this is something that you can do in the long run. Okay. Now that you've known all these bits and pieces of like how to conceptualize your podcast, and I do hope that you guys have been jotting down ideas on what podcast that you want to start, because one thing I'm going to tell you right now is like there's no such thing as a stupid idea. Every idea is a stupid idea unless you really put work into it. Okay, because I really want to pick your brains on like what ideas you guys have at during the workshop, because I want to show you how easy it is to start your own podcast. Okay. So now that you know everything that I've been talking about for the past few slides, right? Your niche, how podcast is intimate, the contents that you can create, and so much more. Okay, now what? This is where I want to help you put in more fillers into your ideas. How to conceptualize your podcast, how to put idea into paper, and how to utilize the paper into a podcast, right? And after that, it's like how to record your podcast, what you need to record your podcast with, and how do you edit and publish your podcast. Come, let's start with conceptualizing a podcast, okay? 4 main pillars here. Always ask yourself when you want to start a podcast, who do you want to be as your audiences? All right, I will be talking about it later on, but just giving you a very generalization of it, right? You're them. Who is your audience, or who is your demographic? Okay, your what? What is your podcast about? Like just now when I mentioned the niches, some people can even do a podcast about pen, a fictional podcast that interviews things that don't exist in real life. What's yours? What's the podcast you want to create about? Which brings me to you. Who are you? Or who do you want to be? Or if I put it very bluntly, what mask do you want to put on when you're behind the mic? Lastly is the why. Okay, you have your them, what, you. That's the main 3 pillars of your podcast. The most important pillar is the why. Why do you want to start your podcast? Why do you want to have this this demographic? Why do you want to talk about this specific topic? Why do you want to select this mask to be behind the mic, right? And after the why is basically, where do you want to go from here? All right, so it's them, what, you, and why. And these 4 pillars are taken out of this book called Make Noise. It's what I call, it's what me and Isa from the Seek to Speak podcast called the podcasting Bible. I think you can get it in Singapore. I mean, it's very easy to get. And it's basically a book that kind of guides you from 0 to 100, everything you need to start your own podcast. All right. And these 4 pillars here are the most important one, in my opinion. Let's start with them. Demographic. You know, everyone will tell you to, like, okay, you want to start your very own podcast. Who are your target? God damn, excuse me. Who are your target audience? You know, who is that person you want to talk to? What do they want? And if they are your audience, do you know what kind of content do you want to give them? Okay. And this, whenever we explain to people about demographic, they will cast a very wide net. Okay. And by casting a very wide net, what I'm trying to say is like, oh, okay, bro, my audience, I want them to be anywhere from like 18 to 30 years old. You know, I want to talk about ABC, DEF. I think they will commute day in, day out. They are English speaking. They are university graduate. Now, what happens when you cast a net that big is that you will get lost in content creation, because you don't really know who that ideal demographic is, who that ideal audience is. Now, my question to you is, again, write this down as I speak. I really want you to like put into an idea when I'm explaining to you, so we can work on it during the workshop. Okay, them who, right? I want you to picture that ideal person that when you are behind a mic and speaking into the mic for your podcast, you are speaking to this person. So to give you an example, I wanted to put a picture of my friend here actually. He was my ideal person, my ideal demographic, but he's like, nope, you can't use my picture. So I had to put a question mark here, okay? So that ideal person I have for Epic Arcade Podcast is my friend called Kevin Schmidty. He's from the States. He is Caucasian. He is English speaking. He is 33 years old. He is a working adult. He commutes about 20 minutes to work from his house. And he enjoys video games. But like me, with that age, with that responsibility, with that job, he don't have time to play games or follow gaming news. So when me and Afiq go on to our podcast, to our Epic Arcade podcast, okay, when I prepare my episode, I prepare it with Kevin in mind. When I pick news with Kevin in mind. When I host, I mean, I'm talking to Afiq, but I also try to use languages that, when I use Rojak language, when I mix my language like English, Bahasa, Chinese, I will pause for a while and explain it in English so that Kevin would understand, right? Going back to this, who is your ideal audiences? I don't want you to cast a wide net. I don't want you to tell me like, oh, Kel, my audiences are 18 to 35 years old. You know, no. I don't want you to do that at all. Find that one person. Find that ideal audience. And from there on, for you to create a podcast, it's so much easier to just plan the content. It's so much easier for you to host. You will then understand who is your audience. You will then understand what you want to talk about. You will then understand who do you want to be behind the mic, and you will have your why. And once you have all these 4, you can have your where. Where do you want to go next? Okay. So does anyone have any question about the them for the time being? I'm just going to steal a quick sip here. I'm going to take that as a no. So we move on. Now, you, which is me, which is trying to tell you that when you're behind a podcast, we put on a mask. We put on a persona. Because like I say, I stutter a lot and I swear a lot. And I tend to do things that get me in trouble with my producers most of the time. But it also depends on what kind of podcast I'm on, right? So the reason why you see two pictures of me here is because on the top, that's the real me. That's me who are silly. That's me on the Epic Arcade podcast where I'm very casual. I am very informal, and I am what people call crazy at times. But at the bottom, in scenarios like this, I have to put on a persona. I have to put on that teacher persona to teach my audiences or to teach the people in the workshop who are you guys on how easy it is to start a podcast. But there are some things that you have to worry about, right? So going back to you, when you have your own podcast, who do you want to be? What kind of mask do you want to put on, and who do you want to portray? Because, for example, for me, two main podcasts that I want to highlight is Epic Arcade, which is my gaming podcast, and Podcast Sessions Malaysia, which is a podcast about podcasts, right? And my business partner Norman with his podcast called Anti-Fool and Tempered Fables. So take Norman here, for example. Anti-Fool with Norman Chella. Why is it called Anti-Fool? I'm going to loosely quote Norman here. Anti-Fool is where he, as a host, acts like the fool, and he interviews industry expert on everything and anything. And he will ask questions like he's a 5 years old, like a child, and get them to break it down as easily as possible for the audiences and himself to understand. Basically, act stupid and get as much information as you can. But if you look at the second podcast that he has called Temple Fables, if you realize it's not by Norman Chella, it's by Anti Clover. So Tempered Fables is a fictional podcast where Norman kind of breaks down his personal experience throughout his life, where he stayed in Australia, Japan, Malaysia, and he crafts a fictional story around that experience. And he put on this persona called Anti Clover. And how he would portray himself on the podcast is it's a fireside podcast where you accidentally stumble upon this fireside, this campsite, and he's telling you a story about his journey. And how he delivered the message is also different because he's also a voice actor. So his volume or his octave would just go a lot lower, a lot calmer, a lot slower. Take me, for example, Epic Arcade. Okay, I'm just going to push my mic a bit further. I'm just going to give you guys an example of the two personas I have as a podcaster. So for Epic Arcade, okay, it's a gaming podcast. So you have to be fun. You have to be loud. You have to be a bit crazy. So how I start my Epic Arcade podcast, it's hello, 大家好, apa khabar semua? My name is Kelvin Tay, and you're listening to another episode of the Epic Arcade podcast where we talk to you about all things gaming this week in gaming. So see, it's a bit high octave, it's a bit high energy. But for Podcast Sessions Malaysia, for example, it's a podcast that plans and guides to teach other people how to start their podcasting journey and how to start their own podcast through the experience and journey of other podcasters. So I can't have high energy. I have to be a bit more serious, a bit toned down, a bit more lecture-ish friendly figure. So how I start my podcast sessions podcast, it's hi, hello, 大家好. My name is Kelvin Tay, and you're now listening to Podcast Sessions Malaysia, where we bring you through, it's that kind of tone. I kind of forgot my own intro. I'm so sorry. But I hope you guys can see the two different personas that I put on the different shows that I have. So going back to you, right? If you have your own podcast, what kind of persona do you want to put on? Do you want to be yourself? Which again, there's no wrong answers here. Do you want to be yourself? Do you want to be a fictional character that you created? Do you want to be someone that you're not? Just to play a role of this host. Take for example, one of my favorite podcasts out there is called Case File. It's a Australian-based true crime podcast hosted by Mystery Man. Like the host himself, it's called Mystery Man. And until today, no one knows who he is. And his show is so dry. The way he portrays himself is so boring. It's just one monotonous voice for an hour, sometimes 2 hours, but I still listen to it every week. Why? Because the content is amazing, and how they break down the true crime stories is also as amazing. And the fact that I know that he plays a mystery man behind the mic and he don't really want people to know who he is in real life gives another layer of reason why I love it. I understand that he wants to be anonymous. That's why he's monotonous. Completely fine. I really like his content. That's why I listen to it every week, even though it's monotonous. Completely fine. So going back to you, think of who you want to be for the podcast you want to start. For me, Epic Arcade, high energy. Podcast Essentials Malaysia, medium to low energy. And I will just guide you through the podcast as a friend who speaks to other podcasters and try to get to know them and their journey. All right? Excuse me. Now, let's touch on the why. Okay? Why do you want to start a podcast? This is a question that a lot of people cannot answer. You will get very generic answers like, I want to start a podcast because I'm bored. I want to start a podcast because I want to educate people. I want to start a podcast because I want to share value. Again, no wrong answers. It's your podcast, right? But you always have to remember giving yourself a why or answering that why when you start a podcast gives you a reason to come in every week to plan your podcast, to talk about that topic that you want, and to push the value, the knowledge you have to the who's. Okay. So why you want to start a podcast? That one I cannot help you answer, right? You really need to know the reason behind why you want to start a podcast. And then once you have found that why, we can then guide you through the next step. Okay. So for example, Two Book Nerds Talking, hosted by Hani and Diana, one of the podcasts that I used to produce, but I helped create it as well. It's a podcast about books, right? That's niche, right? It's a podcast about bookish topics and all things that revolves around books. We can talk about novels, we can talk about fiction, non-fiction, we can talk about biography, etc., etc. So what Hani and Diana do, the why for Hani and Diana is to start a bookish podcast because they are both the biggest book nerds I've ever met in my life. Okay. And when they started this podcast, they were, I think, the first or second Malaysian podcast that talks about books. No one else has done this before. And they've been around for about 4 years now. So that's the why. They love books. They want to talk about books. And the biggest goal that they have is Hani and Diana wants to talk to international authors, which they have already achieved, right? So they have answered their why. I want to start a podcast because I love books. I want to start a podcast because I can't shut up about books. I want to start a podcast. Why? Because I want to have the chance to talk to international authors. Done. Very simple. Now, let's move on to the next. Seek to Speak podcast by Aisa. When Aisa started a podcast, she started during the pandemic itself, which was last 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, Aisa. So she started a podcast. Why? Because her podcast revolves around woman empowerment. Everything and every community she built to empower women. That's her why. She wants to create a community, which she has done. And that community is crazy. You can check her out on Instagram. It's called the Seek to Speak podcast. And just look at the content that she has created, right? It revolves around woman empowerment. That's her why. Loy Jun, Take a Power podcast. Why? Because he loves food. Why? Because he likes to talk about food. Why? Because he likes to break down the story of a certain food. And these are just 3 examples of why, right? And I hope it kind of helps you on why you want to start your own podcast. Now, let's go to the last point, which is what? Okay, you have found your why. You have found your who. Okay, you have found your reason to start a podcast. Now, what do you want to talk about? Again, go back to your why. Once you have answered that why, you can answer your what as well. Take Epic Arcade, for example. On my podcast, I talk about all things gaming every week in gaming, meaning that I throughout the week as I'm working, when I'm on my downtime, I'll just research a bit on gaming news. And from that gaming news, from that gaming news, I'll put it into Google Docs, I'll share it with my co-host Afiq, and we'll just plan out what we can talk about this week. We can then cherry pick what we can talk about this week. The goal here is to update people like Kevin, 33 years old, ex-gamer, loves games a lot, no time to game. And how to update them about this is what you've missed out in this week in gaming, right? So that's exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm trying to prove or show is basically, I mean, this one is just a filler, but I hope you can answer it as well, because it correlates to the first question itself, right? And the last one, what are you advocating or discouraging? Well, for me, it's that you are never too old to stop loving video games on Epic Arcade. For example, no matter how old you are as a gamer, if you grew up a gamer, you'll always be a gamer. If I chuck you a controller, if I chuck you a mouse and keyboard, you will always have that muscle memory on how to game. And that's what I'm trying to advocate about. No matter how old you are, there is still space, there is still time, there is still love for video games. That's my what for the Epic Arcade podcast. Okay. Any questions so far? I guess not. Okay. Take podcast sessions Malaysia, for example. Okay, this is another example that I want to give you on what is about. I started the podcast sessions Malaysia podcast first. And just to reiterate to everyone as a quick reminder, PSMY is a podcast about Malaysian podcasts and the podcaster's journey. From there on, my what is to start a community, okay, which is the Malaysian podcasters community. And I'll never run out of content because there's always new podcasters out there. Okay, my what is to teach people how to start a podcast. So when there's new people who comes into the podcast community and ask me questions, I was like, check out this episode. This person, that person has mentioned something that you asked, and I hope this podcast is valuable to you for your own journey to start your own podcast. Right? That is my what. Now, okay. Your podcast starts with, this is just to reiterate everything that I say, all right? The what, why, who. Who are your audiences? Find that out. What is your podcast about? What's the format? Who do you want to be? That's the host. And finally, where and why do you want your, what and why you want to start your podcast for? Okay, so it's audience, format, host, and mission. And this cycle goes on and on as long as your podcast is out there. And this is what the main 4 pillars of starting a podcast looks like. Okay. And I hope everyone has kind of like jot down a very basic idea of how you want to start your podcast.
So Nicholas has a question. So for podcasts that do a lot of local content, what are your tips to make them appeal? Any tips to make that appealing and accessible for an international audience?
Yeah. I would say stick to your roots. Like, are you from Singapore?
So Nicholas, where are you from? Can you let us know? Unmute yourself. Do you want to unmute and chat with us?
Okay. So I'm assuming you are from Singapore. So if you want to do a lot of local content, I would say stick to your roots. Be as Singaporean as you can, right? And if you have anything that, let's just say, an international audience don't understand, they will probably DM you, or you can explain it at the end of the episode or immediately after you use a local term. Because what I find in Malaysia is when we started our podcast, actually it still resonates until now. 70% of my audiences from Epic Arcade are international. It is the last I checked was US, Australia, UK, Brazil, and then Malaysia. One thing about podcasting, Nicholas, is like you don't have to worry about appealing or being accessible to international audiences, because people, if you market your podcast to the right places, you will get international audience. And sometimes you will have international audience whether you like it or not. You don't really have a choice.
I think I just want to add on to Kelvin's point. So one of the podcasts I do for clients is called Freelance Creative Exchange. So we primarily deal with topics relating to freelance creators in Singapore. And we do have a huge international audience as well, like from from our neighbors, Malaysia, Indonesia, and also from international US as well. We are not directly appealing to them, but somehow I think some of the content, I guess if you are a freelance and you're creative, maybe some of the topics we talked about resonate with them. So, and we never tried to, be, I don't know, be international. We never tried to like put on the accent. We are all as, because we mainly interview Singaporeans, right? So we are or like, other Asians, right? So as Asian as they sound, we never tried to pretend to be anything we're not. And I think people are just drawn to the authenticity, as well.
Nicholas, I'll go back to you.
What? Yeah, where the question kind of came from is also like, I don't think targeting a fully local audience is the way to go, because like in Singapore itself, there's only going to be like how many people listening to podcasts, and within that spectrum, there's going to be a very limited amount of people who are interested in what your subject. So you're gonna get international. So it's just like that was always one of my concerns. Like, okay, if I talk about like a local subject, or if my story I'm talking about is very local, like how is that going to affect
Nicholas, I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you during the Q&A session, because I just want to explore or during the workshop itself.
Yeah, sure.
All right. Okay. I think our 5 minutes break is up. I'm just going to continue to the next slide. So what I'll be talking about next is, by the way, Nicholas, thank you for your contribution. I definitely want to ask you a couple of questions later. Okay, so what I'll be talking next is tools of the trade. Right, and this is where I get a bit geeky, because I'm usually the technical guy, especially when it comes to podcasting. And let's start with the tools. Okay, you've learned how to conceptualize. You have an idea of your podcast. You kind of know what your podcast wants to be about, who you want to be behind the podcast, who are your audiences, who's that perfect guy, the perfect girl, etc., etc. But what's the point if you have no equipment to record on? And this is where I come in and explain to you that there are a couple of tools that you need to start a podcast. Mainly, you need headphones, you need mic, you need an interface, so on and so forth. But the biggest concern that I've seen so far from people that I helped out with is, why are some equipments so expensive? This is where I tell you equipments really don't matter when it comes to podcasting. I mean, it does, but at the same time, it doesn't depend on the caliber of your podcast. So if you just look at the pictures itself, right? You have the biggest mic, the Shure MV7, which costs USD $220, compared to a Shure SV100, which is about $30 US dollars. Or you can just use an out-of-the-box headphones, or like earphones, for example. No one's going to blame you. Okay. Now, when it comes to headphones, when it comes to microphones, there are two microphones that you'll always see in the market. The first one is a condenser mic, and the second one is a dynamic mic. And since this is just a basic 101, I won't go into the details of what a condenser mic is or a dynamic mic is. But if you're recording in a room, okay, if it's just you in a room and your room is somewhat treated, by treated, I mean that it's soft, means when you speak, there's no echo bouncing around, I would always suggest a dynamic mic. Okay, if you're in a studio that is treated, it's completely isolated from outside noise, always use a dynamic mic. Reason being, because it will pick up the clarity of your voice when you speak, and it will help you so much when it comes to post-production. However, a lot of mics out there that you see are condenser mics. Okay. And again, there's no right or wrong. It really depends on the situation and the environment that you're in. But condenser mic and dynamic mic is basically comparing Coca-Cola to Pepsi. Condenser mic has a very nice clarity and it gives you a bass to your voice, but it's also very, very, very sensitive. So I'm using a condenser mic myself, and it is currently it's noise isolated, okay, because of my interface. If my neighbor's dog starts barking, you guys can hear it. If a motorbike passes my window, you guys can hear it. If someone shouts outside of my house, you guys can hear it as well. That's why usually condenser mics are used in studio where it's super isolated, where noise cannot come in or out. Okay. But since this is a 101 course and you want to start your very own podcast with, let's say, a very low budget, it is completely fine if you want to use your out-of-the-box headphones. Okay, it is completely fine if you want to use the mic that comes with the headphones. But remember that 4 episodes that I told you guys about? Start with your 4 episodes. Once you have gone through that and you tell yourself that you want to really start your podcast in the long run, I would say invest in a USB mic. All right. It is low budget. It is cheap. It is for the price itself, it's worth the money. So there's this brand that I always suggest to people, and it's called Fifine. It's a China condenser mic. I'll just type it in chat real quick. It's Fifine, Fifine. And if you are just thinking to start a podcast and you have a bit of budget to play around, start off with a Fifine mic. That is the best stepping stone you can for the price for a microphone for your podcast. Now, whoops. Okay. Now, headphones. If you need a headphones with a label on the side that says professional to tell people that you're professional, you're in the wrong industry. Okay. I'm talking about the Sony MDR 7506. Look at the price. It's 100 USD. And then you have other monitor headphones called like the M50X that cost you 150. And what's the difference between a monitor headphones and other headphones, for example? Marcus, I'll get back to you on that link. Okay, what is the difference between a monitor headphones and a gaming headset? Monitor headphones helps you monitor yourself. Like I'm using a gaming headset right now, but in the studio, we are using monitor headphones. What a monitor headphones does is when you speak into the mic, you will hear yourself through the monitor headphones. And this is crucial, especially if you are recording a podcast, because when you put on a headphones, you can't really hear your external sounds. But a monitor headphones can tell you the clarity of your voice. If you sound bad, if you sound good, if there's any external noise coming in, because this will help you in post-production, especially when you're doing editing. If you don't monitor yourself, you don't know what might go wrong. And if you don't know what might go wrong, what will happen is after you press stop recording and you go into post-production, you won't know until you go into like Audition or Audacity. It's like, oh crap, this chunk of the recording is broken, or this chunk of recording is just not there. A monitor headphones will actually help you hear yourself and see if your audio is fine or not. But let's take the Audio Technica, for example. Okay, there is the Audio Technica M30X, M40X, M50X, M60X, and it goes on and on. I started off with the Audio Technica M30X, which cost me about 250 ringgit, which Raven, what's the conversion rate for like ringgit to Sing dollar?
I haven't checked for a while because we cannot travel, right?
Yeah. So
I 1.3, 1 to 3 or 3.1, somewhere around there.
Yeah. So I'm assuming don't quote me on this. I'm assuming that it's going to be less than about 100 Sing dollar, and for that price, in the long run, 3.8. Yeah. So it's about it's less than 100 Sing dollar. So for that price, I would say always go for amateur level or beginner level monitor headphones. Gaming headset, earphones, earbuds, no problem. Okay, no problem. But I'm just saying it in a point where in the long run, if you want less issues, invest in a monitor headphones because it will really, 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 really help you. Now, yeah, again, me and Raven had this conversation a couple of days ago where audio interfaces kind of like scared us when we first started our podcasting journey, because there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of faders, there's a lot of things that are like, okay, what does this button do? You know that question, like, oh, what does this button do? Don't let this scare you, but the price kind of scared me the first time when I invested in it. A Rodecaster Pro is something that I live by. You guys can't see it because I have like a virtual wallpaper on, but I have a Rodecaster right behind me. And when I got it, it's about 2,500 ringgit. And I can tell you this investment, and I'm talking to those who are planning to go long run, okay? And this investment have helped me so much. Like I have hosted and recorded more than 500 plus episodes on the Rodecaster Pro. And after a year in, it's still tip top, no problem whatsoever, and it's the best companion that I can ever have. But if you don't have $600, if you don't have $350 to buy an interface, it's completely fine too. You can plug the USB microphone into your laptop. You can plug your gaming headset into your laptop, and you can just use DAW software to just record your episode. Again, there's no right or wrong way. What I'm trying to guide you here is what is a better way so you won't have more headache later on in the future. So do you need an audio interface? If you're using a USB headphones, no. But if you're using a condenser or dynamic mic, yes. Reason why is because if you look at the H6, the Zoom H6 on the right side, on the left side of the device itself, you'll see those big ports, those big circle ports. Oh, that's expensive. Thank you, Raven. Yeah, so those are called XLR ports. And condenser and dynamic mic usually use XLR ports, which looks like this. Okay, if you look at that cable, those are called XLR cables, and it basically powers the microphone, mainly because the interfaces have the ability to push 48 volts of power into the mic, which powers the mic. There's no easier way to explain this. It's very, very technical. Basically, expensive mic needs voltage to be powered. If not, you won't hear anything from the mic. And audio interface works to push that 48 volt power into the mic so that you can hear the true potential of the mic that you have. Okay. Again, if you are on a budget, if you have a limit when it comes to like finances, it's completely fine to just download a DAW software and just record from the laptop or your PC. There are a lot of online tools out there like Anchor, for example, like Audacity, for example, or some other podcast recording software that you can just like Zoom, for example. You can just extract the audio, edit it, push it out, publish it, and it's completely fine. A lot of people that I know have run a podcast without an interface. Now, the rest of the tools are, these are just some accessories for you to kind of level up your podcasting game. A good and decent XLR cable, pop filters, mic arm, dead cat, and insulation foams for your room or your studio, for example. So yeah, I think that's about. So these are some very generic pictures that I've gotten off the internet from Google Images. These are how the pros do it, right? You constantly see people posting up very fancy pictures of a studio with like super expensive equipment, super isolated. They always look happy for some reason. And it always kind of scare people. It's like, oh, to start a podcast, I need a lot of money. Or to start a podcast, I need to have this tool or that tool. What I'm trying to tell you is not really, because these are how the real pros do it. This is Ira Glass. I think he's the host or producer of This American Life, and Stacey Vanek Smith from the indicator podcast from NPR. So during the lockdown last year in the States due to the pandemic, this is how, just mind you, these two podcasts, This American Life and The Indicator, are downloaded millions of time every month. All right, their audience is crazy, it's off the charts, and they're top 100 podcasts in like the 4 million podcast index that you guys seen previously. And it's how they record their podcast during the lockdown in their own home. Ira Glass recorded everything in his own closet, which usually his doors are closed. And what Stacy did was she literally built a blanket fort, right, with a shotgun mic. So what I'm trying to tell you here is like there is no right or wrong way to record your podcast, and the tools doesn't really matter as well, as long as you just have the creativity to start your podcast. Again, you can start or record your podcast in your closet, build a blanket fort, build a pillow fort, however you want to do it, just do it. And yeah, this is a digital audio workstation, which is a DAW. And this is what I see on a day-to-day basis because I am an audio editor for Renegade Radio. And what I'm trying to show you here is like, this is how you do post-production, which later on I will explain. On the left side is a software called Audacity. And I'm assuming a lot of you here, or some of you here, are quite familiar with Audacity. It's a free software that you can just download online and start importing your audio files and editing your audio later on. On the right, which is the paid one, is Adobe Audition. It has a monthly subscription, if I'm mistaken, about $19 a month. And it's both the same thing. Both can basically edit a podcast. It's just how professional you want your audio to sound like. I've used Audacity for a good 2 years. And then after that, I moved on to Adobe Audition. And well, I will leave it to the pros to explain to you guys, which is this one. Raven will be running her basic audio editing workshop tomorrow, and Danny will be running it next Sunday. Well, is
yes,
it? Next Sunday.
So, but I just want to preempt, right? For my one is really basic, so I won't really touch on Audacity. But Danny, he will be really going through in depth about Audacity in terms of how to edit, how to mix, how to master, and what are the specifications. For mine is more for people, well, the thing about it, mine is more for people who don't like editing, who just want, but you should also attend, because if you want to know how to use like certain tools to help make your life easier, if you sometimes, you just want to, simplify a work process, you can consider my class. But if you want like really like hands-on Audacity, like 101, up to the level where, how to create an episode from recording to the fact that it's ready to go on, is ready to be published, professionally, then you should definitely attend Danny. Mine is like, for those who just want to like, I don't care about editing, I just want to record and then use AI to help me with certain things and then publish it. Yeah.
So I mean, like, if you are already at this step, right, you want to start your own podcast, you have done recording, you have planned out everything. Post-production, I always have to put, is very important because it can either break or make your episode better or worse. So yeah, look out for these two classes. Highly recommended. And when it comes to hosting, there are an abundance of hosting sites out there. Personally, for Renegade Radio, we use Spreaker. Okay, it's a paid service that can host hours and hours of content. If I'm not mistaken, we have about 1,000 plus hours sign up with Spreaker. But there's also free ones, like Buzzsprout, like Anchor. I wouldn't recommend SoundCloud. This is just a very generic image that I found online. But yeah, look out for Libsyn, Anchor, or Buzzsprout if you want free options, right? There are limits to what the free accounts can do, but if you want to just start off with like 4 episodes, like I say, you upload 4 episodes and just share with your friends, your family, your loved ones, get feedback. And then if you want to move on to like episode 5 or more, you can then pay for different subscription services through these hosting sites. And yeah, that's an hour and a half. I think that's more than an hour and a half, right? And yeah, we will then move on to the workshop, which I hope most of you can contribute to. So during my talk just now, right, I have asked you guys to visualize your podcast, come up with an idea of your podcast, visualize who you want to be behind a podcast, what kind of content you want to create, so on and so forth. And during the workshop itself, I would like to kind of just pick your idea on the idea of your podcast you have in mind, and just work with you through whatever idea you have. Okay, so this is gonna be a very hands-on experience with most of you. So I hope some of you could contribute. Does anyone have an idea or something planned out? Come on, guys, it's a workshop. We have to work together, guys.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to test out your ideas. So if you have anything or something you're working on, or you want to level out your podcast,
yeah. Or anyone have any questions for their podcast, or just give me a general idea. Nobody really.
Hi, Kelvin.
Oh, hello.
Hi, who's this?
Hi, this is Reno. I'm just gonna on my video, but apologies, I'm actually lying on my bed,
No worries.
listening to this.
I wish I can be in your position as well.
But yeah, thanks for sharing everything so far. It's been very insightful. Yeah, maybe I can just share what I wanted to do for my podcast lah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so it's actually called Next Time Do What. So essentially, the problem that I faced growing up, and even now actually as a uni student, is that I don't really know what I want to do in the future, and we spend so much time actually studying and being told that we have to find certain specific traditional jobs that are traditionally good lah. And I find that a lot of my friends, even up to now, still have no clue, once we go onto the workforce, what do we do? So the idea of the podcast actually is just to interview people from various jobs, and more specifically, more unconventional jobs. So my target audience is actually, I would say myself when I was 13 to 16 years old, when I thought like I had a lot of ideas on what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know what those jobs encompassed.
Okay.
So just for instance, I wanted to be a paleontologist, which is like the study of like extinct animals, which is completely unrealistic in Singapore, but that was just an idea. But I had no idea what they did, whether it was possible in Singapore, things like that. But the whole idea is to interview people from all walks of not all walks of life, more of the different career types. And the goal of it is to give younger kids, or even students, or even working adults, actually anyone who is looking for a career switch or just wondering what they could possibly do, give them a bit more options. Like for instance, wine tasters exist, for instance, professional gamers exist, things like that, right? But those jobs aren't sort of like revered in the media or talked about very often. So I wanted to get into.
If you don't mind me asking, how young are you this year?
I am 25. I just turned 25 2 days ago.
Lucky you, man. Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
So looking at your niches, your what, your why, you kind of have everything figured out already. You basically just gave me an entire plan of what your podcast is about, right? Your niche is you want to interview or highlight jobs that are not usually heard of or seen in Singapore, for example. Your what is to give value back to young adults or teenagers to young adults of what kind of jobs are available out there, and what unconventional path that they are able to take when they grow up, right?
Yeah.
And your why is to also highlight this very, I would say unique jobs that you can find in Singapore or like around the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's stopping you?
What's stopping me?
I
mean, that's why I'm here.
You literally have everything. You literally have everything to start your first pilot episode already.
Right.
So what do you need help with? Let's just take.
Yeah, okay. I think something that I need help with probably would be, I think, getting people on board, because finding them is one thing. Like I have a short list of a whole bunch of people that I want to find. I curated this list through like LinkedIn. Like, for example, I just searched a particular job on LinkedIn.
That's exactly what I was about to tell you. But
Yeah.
okay, keep going.
But I did that, and so I found a few people. I actually emailed a wine taster. I can't pronounce the word for professional wine taster. Sommelier, or I think it's different pronunciation, but I got in contact with one. He said he found it interesting, but he couldn't join the podcast because he's working for a company, and that company in particular didn't allow him to come on board because that would impact the company somewhat.
Okay.
I found a florist that I thought was really interesting. I can only send, I think, 300 character messages on LinkedIn without premium. Hasn't gotten back to me yet. And so I was just wondering, like, in addition to the problem of finding people with specific jobs that are interesting, how do I get in touch with them through LinkedIn if I don't want to buy premium?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. Raven, I think the format might change a bit already, because the workshop has kind of like turned into a hybrid of a workshop and a Q&A.
Okay. No worries.
Right?
It's up to you.
Yeah.
How you want to run it? Yeah. Okay.
Reynald.
Reynolds.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Reynald. Okay. Reynald. Do you have a first episode out already?
No, but I have a trailer.
Okay, you have a
Yeah.
trailer. Do you have a deck for your podcast? Introductory deck for your podcast?
Well, I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would suggest to you to have a deck.
Okay.
Okay. Create like a 2 to 3 page or like 1 to 3 page deck of your podcast. What is it about? Who are you? What is the goal of your podcast? And just make it as nice as possible, as inviting as possible. What you've done so far is you are literally on the right path. Like I'm asking you, like, you don't need help. You just need someone to push you off the edge. That's all, right? What you need to do is, like, for the LinkedIn one, you already have a list. Once you have the list, tell them, send them a very short introduction of who you are, what you are, and you want to immediately get their emails.
Okay.
Hey, my name is Reynald. I have this podcast. I really like what you do. Can I have your email to send you more information?
Okay.
Once you have acquired their email, do a secondary introduction of yourself via the email. Send the deck out. Send them a trailer. Send them as much information. I mean, you don't want to you don't want to flood them with all the information you have. You want to kind of tease them a bit, like play with their curiosity. Like, why do you want them on your show?
Okay.
So create a deck of what your podcast is about, who you are, what you want to talk about. Send them a trailer. Just send the email off. Just be as thick-skinned as possible. Just like be as like do you know the term tatau malu?
No.
like you don't know shame. Like,
Right,
just be
okay.
super thick face. It's like, I really want you on your show because I really love your work. It's very unique. But butter them up a bit.
Right.
Send it off. Right. What you want to acquire is the first step, which is their email address. If you don't have the email address, there's nothing you can do. And a follow-up to that is always have plan B and plan C ready. Because the amount of times that I have seek external guests, which is like a cold reach out to potential guests on my show, 4 out of 10 times would not reply you. They won't even bother, and that's completely fine. Okay, sell them the idea of why they should be on your podcast. Right. But other than that, yeah, I think your podcast is a great idea. Right? You don't need help. You just need a push in.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kelvin. Yeah, appreciate all this.
You're welcome. I think
we have a question from Joe. Joe,
From-
do you want to unmute yourself and talk to Kelvin directly?
Hi guys.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Hi, Joe. Morning.
So morning, hi. I just do podcasting for fun, and currently I'm not hosted, but I just upload them onto YouTube. And I've done 5 on a very casual mode. So I've got some questions. I do invite guests, like what Kelvin said, he does himself. But at times, I'm not pretty sure how do you actually go about managing a subject or a topic of discussion with your guests. Like, do you just dive right into the podcasting and record immediately? Or do you actually discuss it with your guests first? What is a preferred and a more correct way of doing a podcast with guests?
Okay, can you just paint me a picture, very simply, what
sure.
your podcast is about?
I don't. Okay. That's another subject altogether. I don't have like a team or whatsoever, but occasionally I discuss things like travel, or even subjects like insomnia. So basically, I just cover anything under the sun. I didn't really narrow down to one specific type. And then, for example, I talk about going to Iran with a guy, and then he will share like how his travel experiences going to Iran, and then how much fun it is to travel solo. So that was basically one of the podcasts that I did with a friend. And I find that the way that worked for me was that at least I discussed the main subjects with him beforehand, like maybe list down like 5 main topics. Like we talked about lodging, we talk about exchange of currency and places of interest before we actually start recording. I'm not sure this is a good method or not.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, thanks for this. So you said you don't really have a theme for your podcast, but after what you explained, you discuss travel, insomnia, and everything under the sun. I would say this could be categorized as a lifestyle podcast. Okay. And there is, okay, going to your question, how to manage guests, right, on topics. So the fact that you have already listed down like 5 topics beforehand with the guests, it's a good step. What I would suggest you to do is that always have a brief. I don't know if I can show you guys here. Let me show everyone what a Renegade brief looks like for when we reach out to guests. So, Joe, this is what a brief, a behind the scene brief looks like for us. Okay, this is for the podcast Cultivating the Masses, and we would usually send the first page to our guest. Okay, and the first page is basically what is the podcast about, what is the aim we achieve for this season of this podcast, and what the show is about. Okay, and then we will give them episode information, who the host is, the producers, the guests, blah blah blah, and then these are all scripts and questions already. Okay, if you look at the questions, this is a bit beefy lah. Okay, we have question 1, 2, 3, and then there's sub questions. This is just to fill up an entire hour worth of content and research we have for the guest. Okay, but when we send this out, when we send this brief, remember I told you we only send the first page to the guest. We only send the questions. We don't send them the 1A, 1B, 1C. We let's just say here we have about like 10 questions, for example, right? We will send them 5 only. Okay. The reason why we do this is because you want the guest to understand why they are appearing on your show. You want the guest to understand what your show is about. And you want the guest to have like a preamp of what kind of questions you will ask them. So let's just say in the icebreaker segment, what we usually do is we will just summarize question 1, 2, and 3 into one sentence. We will ask you about your life, your journey, and what you are doing right now. Okay? We don't tell them 1A, 1B, 1C. The reason we do this is because we have experience, and our colleagues have experience where they get a guest on and they send all the questions off. Okay. What happens then was some guests will come in with like a whole what is karangan? A whole essay on their answer. So let's just say you ask them, "Hey Joe, how are you doing?" Or then they'll just look at their script and they'll be like, "Oh, I am doing okay. I am fine." And then that's not the kind of content you want to create, right?
Sure.
You want to create a very genuine, casual, candid experience where you are really enjoying a conversation with the guests that whom you might or might not know, right? So don't give them everything. So for you, what I would do is, like, again, wrap up your podcast, wrap up your question, figure out the angle you want to tell, figure out the story you want to tell, figure out what is the takeaway for your podcast. And from there on, you can start crafting your stories. You can start crafting your questions that will fit the episode, that would fit the guests, and in turn will fit your audience as well.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. So what you're basically saying is just let them be very natural when they do the talking.
Yeah, of course.
And it shouldn't be something that is too crafted. It should also be so in other words, like let them be very genuine in their reply.
Yep, because whenever I go into an interview with all the guests that I have on my show before, right? I never ever use the word interview. I would never use the word interview when I see them in person. Even in the email threads that I say, there is no words of interview. It's always a conversation. When I have you on my show, I'm not going to interview you. I'm not going to pry you. I'm not going to open you up. I want to have a genuine conversation with my guests. And most of the time, these guests are people who I just met the first time. And the setting that I've prepared them for is just two friends who are just catching up on their life. Reason why I do that is because whenever you tell people it's an interview, they will tense up. And once they tense up, the answer that they give you would be very monotonous, very formal, very blah. It's just not interesting.
Right.
And yeah, you want to avoid that. Even for the formal businessy podcast that we run under Renegade Radio, what we try to do is, like, we don't call it an interview. It's a conversation, because only through conversation I can truly get to know you. Only through a conversation I can break down your walls and ask you things that no one can ask you. Only through a conversation I can understand you and get to know you as a friend. But if it's an interview, the only roles you have is a host and a guest. It's not friends and friends. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Kelvin.
You're welcome.
So far, I don't think I see any other
it's
questions.
Hi, Kelvin.
Anyone? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Meghana. They can call me Meg.
Okay. Hi, Meg.
Hi, Meg.
Hi. So thank you for your sharing. It was really insightful. And unlike the other two, I don't really have a full plan for a podcast, but so what I really need help with is the conceptualization part.
Okay.
So when you went through the conceptualization, the circle, so me and my friend, we kind of have an idea for a podcast, and we have our you, so we have our roles, and we kind of have our why, but we don't really know what our what is gonna be. So yeah, so because in just a brief is that I'm an art student. So I've actually studied in Faculty of Arts. So I'm a Bachelor of Social Sciences, but arts student. But my passion, one of my passions is in physics and quantum physics. And my friend, she's a life science student. So she graduated with a Bachelor of Science, but then her passion is more in history. So we wanted to always do a podcast where we take two different perspectives. So her being a science student and me being an arts student, we want to talk about something from our various disciplines, but also just to see a different perspective, and also just have a conversation about something, so that we can just find some common ground, because there's a lot of passions that we do share together, comic books and mostly comic books and stories. So that's something so it's just an idea that we just have like throwing around. So we have our roles that we want to play, but we don't really know like what we will be talking about. And the reason why we really want to do this is just because I think like Reynolds said, a lot of people don't really know what they want to do in life, especially like people my age. So I like just turned 23, and a lot of the times we end up doing I guess a course that is just an arts course or just a science, and there's not really like an overlap, even though like a lot of my friends, they're not just purely science kids or arts kids. Their passions are more I guess multidisciplinary, you know. And for a lot of people it feels like when they take one specific stream, like for example engineering or something, it feels like they've like given up a part of like their other passions like arts or something. So we just wanted to like, you know, have a conversation and discuss something, but from like two different kinds of perspectives, to also like feel like we can still learn from each other, but also just have a conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you for sharing.
yeah.
Okay. So I have history, I have science,
Yeah.
I have arts, I
Yes.
have comic books.
Yeah.
Okay. This is very, very different practices. So there's definitely a couple of ideas that you and your friends have thought about when you ask about, okay, Meg, what do you want to talk about on your podcast, right? What are like the top 2 questions that you guys have so far, or like top 2 topics that you guys have so far?
I think it's just any phenomenon, like for example like something we haven't really like thought of like specific things, but it's mostly just things we
Okay.
come across.
Then
So yeah.
then I believe that you might be casting your net too wide.
Yeah.
You have to bring down your demographic, you know, because like I said just now, people like to cast a very wide net on who you want to capture. Let's just say you're 23 this year, you're in Singapore, you are in both arts and science and also history and also comic books, right? So boil it down, right? Figure out between you and your friends what are the most common interests that you both share.
Okay.
Right? It can be something in history, something in science, something in arts, but boil down your audiences.
Okay.
You already okay. So your them, for example.
Yeah.
Who is your demographic right now?
I think right now it's just us ourselves, because we are interested in like a multidisciplinary look into different things. It's just that we don't really have that kind of insight into the other fields. So for me, I don't really know like in depth about the sciences, or what like the way they think. I think the way they you learn how to think is different from like the arts faculty and a science faculty.
Definitely.
So that's basically like the main reason why we wanted to do a podcast. So just to like discuss a specific topic so that I can learn of how she thinks, and she can like think about this thing in like in the way that I see the world. Yeah.
Wait, you mentioned that you're in history or science? Or
no, I'm an art student.
Okay, you're
but
in
my
arts.
passion is like, one of my passions is quantum physics, which I didn't study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is a challenge. Okay, quantum.
Yeah, which is why we have a hard time, because at the heart of it, our passions are different from what we've studied. Even though we like what we studied, our passions are like, one of our passions is in like the other sector kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I would say boil down into one topic that you guys like. Maybe, for example, you can touch on comic books let's just take comic books for example, right?
Yeah.
Name me a comic. Or a hero. Okay, Constantine, for example. Okay, Constantine is very interesting that you brought that up, because it combines all history, science, and arts.
Yeah.
Okay, why not you try an episode, or do you already have a first episode out?
No, we haven't actually started, so we're just conceptualizing.
Let's just take Constantine for example, right?
Yeah.
Why don't you break down the science and arts and history in Constantine into into a half an hour episode?
Okay.
Right, and from there on, maybe you can highlight your expertise in a certain chapter or a certain book in Constantine, for example, and your friend can highlight another point.
Okay.
right? Because for now, your biggest challenge is to boil down all history, quantum science, and also arts into one general demographic. So you went from niche to super niche.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Try to escape this hole and see what else you can play around with.
Okay.
Actually, if possible, just send me an email after the talk. I really want to explore this with you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
I really want to explore this with you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mac.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Nicholas. Oh, D&D podcast. Okay, Nicholas, are you here? My friends are asking me to start a D&D podcast as well. And for the longest time, I've been trying to wrap my head around how do you bring 5 really uninteresting people how do you bring 5 very uninteresting nerds and make it super interesting? Because the way we play D&D is just like, okay, roll dice, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. So how do you make that interesting, right? Going to your question is the mics, right? How big is the room or the studio?
I don't know. So one of my friends, he owns his own store, game store.
Okay.
I think we'll kind of just like record there. I think it's pretty small. But yeah, I think that's kind of the way to go for us. It's a small room. I think echo-wise, not much. It's not really like an empty hollow room or anything like that. So don't think we'll have a problem with that.
How high is the ceiling? So
I've never really thought about that.
So the
like a regular room.
So this is a very technical question, especially when it comes to like mics, right? The earliest mistakes I've done with mic is trusting the store person telling me that one mic can record 3%. Because of him, I bought this mic, which is a MXL. Oh shit! Okay, no one can see this. Which is a MXL 990, which cost me about 500 ringgit. You cannot record up to like 3 people. Okay, so the best suggestion I can tell you is like at least one person, one mic. Okay, but if cost is the problem, at least get like 4 mics. You want to at least capture each corner of the room where the players are. Okay. Second thing you need to really be aware of is external factors. How high is the ceiling? When I ask you that, it's because when you have a high ceiling that is like empty, you will create a lot of echo. Okay, so when you do post-production or you just want to upload the entire episode itself, you will have a lot of echo problem where the volume and the environment will just sound super off, right? It will just sound super unattractive. What I will suggest you to do is soften the room up. By soften the room up, what kind of tables you're using when you play D&D at the store?
Just a regular table. It's not really
like plastic tables.
Wood, I think.
Okay, wood is fine. I would say the biggest concern now I have in mind is how you are going to treat the room to make the podcast sound as clean as possible. Are you planning to do post production?
Hopefully not.
Okay,
I know that is not something.
No. It's completely fine. If you don't plan on doing post production, then your pre-production have to be really well planned out. So soften the table up. By that I mean you can find some thick blanket, put it, drip it on the table. Find curtains that are heavy to try to surround the 5 of you as much as possible. All right. The more treatment you have in that room or in that game room, the better it is for post-production. Because you mentioned you have 5 people in the studio, including myself. Yeah, so 5 of you with 3 mics. Do you know about oh my god, what is the word for it? Do you know about
omnidirectional mics. Is it?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, direction mics. So every mic, I'm just gonna use this. Can you guys see this? Okay, let's just say that this is the mic input. When you speak into the mic, it goes here. Some mics can go up to 1 meter. Some mics can go up to 2 meters. Some mics can go up to 3 meters. Okay. So what happens is the most ideal way for you to use a mic, whether if it's dynamic or condensed, you need to be about 4 fingers or like 1 hand away from the mic. Okay. Like my mic is here. It has been here. It has been about 1 hand away from me, because that's how you get clarity of your voice. But if you sit far away, if you're out of the direction part, you can barely hear me unless you shout. Okay. If you have 2 people and they are far away, what happens is like you will have a lot of you will have to bring the gain of the mic up, which will in turn record a lot of external noise that you don't like. Okay, so I would say 1 is treat the game room as much as you can, and 2, invest in at least 1 more mic. Or if you want the best and cheap suggestion, just look out for lapel mics or like left mics, which is like the clip-on mics. There's this brand in Malaysia that you can find called Boya, Boya.
You can get it in Singapore also.
Yeah.
Very cheap on Shopee.
I have some left mics.
Yeah, left mics. If you have 5 people and you really don't want to invest in like condenser lah, dynamic lah, or like USB
and
mic,
mixer.
yeah, or mixer, just use the left. Just use a clip-on mic. 5 would cost you, I don't know, less than $100 if you use a Boya one.
Yeah.
And then you can just extract all 5 track into a DAW, clean it up a bit, and publish it. Yeah, left mic would be the best option for you.
Yeah. But you still have to, like Kelvin said, you still have to treat your room though, because left mic is omnidirectional. You'll pick up and everything. So when you record, right, your different mics, it won't be so clean. It will actually pick up. So you have to be very careful in terms of how you treat the room, like Kelvin suggests, and also how you position your teammates as well. Yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think I've heard, I mean, I would say I'm a novice player. I miss D&D. We can't play it now, right? Because in Singapore there are like 2 restrictions. But yeah, there are some really good podcasts. I'm pretty sure you might have checked out a few as well. They do like, so do check them out. I think, for I guess a cheap option, lapel will be the way to go. But your room is very important, because if it's echoey, if it's, then it will really affect the audio quality as well. Especially for, like, I guess like usually a D&D podcast tend to be a bit long. So you don't want it to be a terrible listening experience, right? Because a game is like, like 1 hour, a couple of hours, depending. You don't want to be like, a terrible listening experience for your audience as well. So you kind of have to balance in terms of quality and budget.
Sure. Thanks.
I'm excited to hear your D&D podcast, honestly.
Well, since we're on that topic and you've been thinking about doing a D&D podcast, I guess you can talk a bit about it as well. I don't know, like on your question about like making people like 5 geeks or whatever seem interesting. I think my campaign will have like very little combat, because like in audio form it's just mostly roleplay. I think that's where like everything. So like all the combat is gonna be like super fast, or at least that's how I'm going to do it. Or like I'll resolve it very quickly, and then we just move on to roleplay. So I have to get like people who are very drama.
Because was it you who mentioned that you also put it? Oh no, that's Joe. Joe was the one that uploaded to YouTube. So for your podcast, do you have a video companion, or is it just purely RSS audio only?
I think I'll just I think I'll put it on YouTube, but it wouldn't be like Critical Role where like everybody has one camera, that kind of thing.
Yep.
It's like it'll just be audio, and then I have like a graphic over it or something.
Yeah.
For now, I don't really want to invest in like video stuff right now. Just one step at a time. And I also think it's a nightmare to do video editing, so I don't want to do that. Just like if max, I'll just do like one cam. Like,
Okay.
capture the room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say as long as you have one camera. Wait, before I go there, how entertaining is your dungeon master?
Oh, I'm very entertaining.
Okay, so you are the DM. Okay, good. Because
Yes.
one of my biggest concerns, especially when it comes to like a D&D podcast, because it's purely fictional, it's purely storytelling, it's purely narrative, and the craziest factor that comes to a D&D podcast is like how crazy is the DM and how crazy can the players be, because that's your entertainment value. Okay.
Yeah.
If you don't have the entertainment value, it's just going to be your audience listening to just 5 people talking about, I don't know, dwarves and dragons and elves and all the stuff, right? So
Yep.
I would say, well, I hope you are a super amazing and entertaining GM. Okay. I hope that your players are as entertaining as well, and at least have one video companion. Mainly not for YouTube's sake. Okay, not for YouTube's sake, but Caleb is asking what's D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. It's a role-playing board game with dice.
Sorry, that's
Nicholas, the last thing is I hope you have a video companion, because I don't want you to put it on YouTube. I mean, you can put it on YouTube if you want, but it's to get highlights of interesting moments during the gameplay. This is for micro content, meaning that you can take 1-minute clips for Insta Reels, Insta Story, Instagram feed, TikTok. Find like let's just say okay, that your session is like half an hour long, okay, which we all know it won't last half an hour. Let's just say in that half an hour slot, there are 3 very interesting funny moments or like really stupid moments that can be clipped and pushed to social to garner or like to hook potential audiences in. That's what you need the video companion for. Okay.
Right.
Give people a reason to visit your podcast, and give people a reason to press play. Okay.
Cool.
You definitely need to reel them in.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, man. Looking forward to that.
Of course.
Hi, I do have a question.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. Sorry. I keep switching on my video, and then I realized that like it's the wrong time to interject, and so I keep switching it.
It's
on and
fine.
on.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thanks for the very informative session, and everyone else for like the questions. I think I've learned a lot. But to kind of build on like Nicholas's question about like, D&D, there are multiple guests and maybe using like caliper mics and whatnot. I'm just wondering out loud, right? Like, for example, if I want to only get one mic, so I've been using a Yeti mic sort of thing. And I realized the thing which was what you mentioned, if you're a bit too far away, the sound quality drastically drops. So I'm just wondering out loud also, because like I know Raven did mention that we have Boya mics in Singapore as well. So my question is simply like, if I use all these like caliper mics versus say if because sorry, a bit about the podcast I want to do. So like the podcast I wanted to do is more about like self-development, but using very fun games and current topics to really like bring that about. So for example, like I'm sorry to bring this up, but like the whole NOC saga. So I think
Wait.
that.
Hold on, let me stop you there.
Yes.
What is the NOC saga? I am.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you have unlocked a can of worms.
Oh no. Okay, in summary, there is this like influencer figure in Singapore. So she's called out for being a bad boss and like
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know. I know. Okay. So that's called the NOC
Yeah.
saga. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I call it the NOC saga. I don't know about other people, right? But for instance, like the NOC saga, I thought it was a very good like topic to kind of talk about other things related to, for example, like workplace stuff and whatnot. So my intention for my podcast, I want to kind of like do so-called street interviews as well.
Okay. Interesting.
And like play and design and play some games because I have some friends who are coaches, like coaches for different things, and I thought that like by playing the games, my listeners can also learn some sort of new skills to improve their lives. So in this instance, if I want to do say street interviews, if I want to play games with people and whatnot, then yeah, because Raven mentioned something about like the caliper mics being omnidirectional as well, right? Then I'm just wondering, like, is it still feasible, or should I just like completely take this
Okay.
sort of segments out? Yeah.
Question for you.
Yes.
How many people, including, let's say if you're doing like a street quiz, for example, to like ask random people random things, including the random people you'll be asking on the streets, how many people all together in that podcast? So I'm assuming it's just one host and one guest.
So the way I sort of envisioned it, which is my second question, right? Because like, how long should the podcast be? Because for YouTube videos, if your
10 minutes.
content is not, so 10 minutes should be the podcast.
I mean no, I'm sorry, YouTube is usually 10 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless you're like one of those YouTubers with a lot of like different edits and whatnot. But
okay, so what I got here is, okay, you want to start a self-development podcast that asks people on the streets about hot topics in Singapore.
it's not really, that's just one of the so the podcast for what I had envisioned was I'll probably have a guest, right? And then we'll talk about whatever topic it is lah. And then with whatever this topic is, maybe sometimes we will open this game up to other people as well. So for example, if the topic is about breaking your fears, right? People in Singapore in general, from my experience, people are a bit shy and they don't usually smile at you. So one of the games that I may want to play is I'll probably just like go out onto the streets and then I will say hi to people randomly, right? And people can either have a very, oh, what is she doing sort of response, or people can be very friendly. And maybe if they're open to it, then I'll ask them, hey, you don't know me, I don't know you. When I smiled at you, how did you feel about that, for example? So when I say games, it's
okay,
an
understood.
activity like that.
Will you have video companion for what you're doing as well, or is it just pure audio?
Which is my third question, right? Because like if say I one of those pod faders that like I did 3 episodes and then I just died and I stopped doing it. That being said, the reason why I wanted to explore podcasts was because video editing is why it's a lot of work. And my third question was, if say I am recording for video, does it change very drastically for compared to if I'm editing for podcasting? Because my understanding is that podcasting it's only audio. So my assumption is that perhaps I'll insert more sound effects and certain things that I want to express through video. I need to somehow make it very vocal as well.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Give me a second.
So I know it's one of those questions, 1 A, B, C, D sort of.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So I just want to show everyone what editing looks like for a while. This is a very basic guide of what audio editing looks like. Okay, So if you have video, you know there's a second element that you have to play around with, right? But when it comes to audio, my go-to app is usually Adobe Audition. I stopped using Audacity already. Okay, so if you want to clean up audio, let's just say this track one, which is the green track, is your lapel mic, okay, which is you, and this purple one is your guest, for example. All you have to do is just extract the audio that you have recorded on the streets. The biggest issue that you will find is the synchronizing issue. Okay, let's just say you have two lapel mics. That means you have two different tracks. How do you want to sync those two tracks into one slot? I mean, there's a very simple guide to it, which is clapping or snapping. Right? You can either snap into the mic or you can clap into the mic, and then it will leave you like, let me see if I can show it to you here. So if you clap oh wait, I can't record because I'm using my mic.
You're using Zoom.
Yeah, I'm using Zoom.
But I got you.
Yeah, you can clap or snap out. So if you want to do video, then there is another factor you need to learn, which is Adobe Premiere Pro or like whatever.
Actually, my background is in Premiere Pro, and then I came into this more vocal kind of thing because it's a lot of work like for the
for Premiere Pro, if I'm not mistaken, there's also essential sounds that you can play with, right? Because I do know, I do know a couple of podcasters that edits their podcasts on Premiere Pro because they are video editors. So you can sync the audio as well in Adobe Audition. Look for this function called Essential Sounds. Okay, under Essential Sound, you can then edit each individual track, and it's just the click of a couple buttons. You can email me after the workshop. I can give you a very, very basic guide on it, right? But going back to your question, what kind of mic do you need? I would say if you're on the streets, it will be, because like you say, right? You said it, not me. Singaporeans are very shy. Okay, I'm not gonna start a neighborhood war here. Okay, so let's just say, for example, guys, for example, for the record, for example, Singaporeans are shy. If you were to ask them, like, go up to them and say, hey, can you just wear this lapel mic for me? You know, even as a Malaysian, like, hey, what are you trying to do, right? So I would say look for a shotgun mic. Okay, look for a shotgun mic or a dynamic mic that you can use on the streets, right? If you have the budget, I would even ask you to look into like a Zoom H2, Zoom H3, Zoom H4. Okay, it's a ZOOM H4. It's a portable recorder. I have it in my studio, not here.
It's one of those.
Yes, it's a grab and go, and then if I'm not mistaken, it comes with like 2 to 4 XLR ports. So if you want to start a podcast outdoors, that's my usual go-to. I have one because I usually just plug it in my car and I drive around and just record it with my friends.
I see. But what if I just okay, I'm just wondering, what if I just used my handphone now? Like
you can do that. There is does your phone come with a 3.5 mm jack?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
yes, it
so
does.
just find a 3.5 mm jack on Shopee. There's usually a lot of good China ones out there. That's good enough. That's really, really good enough, right?
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to jump in because I've done a podcast where we record on the street. Okay. Yes, it's true that Singaporeans are shy, but we have gotten a lot of interviews just by asking Vox Talks, So it's not.
Yeah, that's what
I think it depends on who you approach. So knowing who to approach is better. And from experience, we also realize, right? It's better to be as subtle as possible. So it's probably, I don't know, like I've seen overseas like podcasters have very big setups, right? But for me, when I did it for Ye Ning, I think she she's also one of the co-hosts today. She's a bit busy at the moment. She had a podcast, narrative storytelling podcast, which will be released later in the year. And what we did is we walked around the streets. We try to be, we try to not to look like so obviously that we are trying to record or trying to film someone. I mean, technically it's audio, right? So we just carry around like Zoom H5.
And then you surprise people like,
Hey.
Yeah, like if they say yes, and then the Zoom H5 comes out immediately. Like you don't give them hesitation, right? Like if they say yes, like you want to do it, and then we just whip it out from our bag, and it's easier to hide as well. Like because you can hide it in your backpack or a waist pouch or sling bag, and you just hide it and you just like bring it out and talk to them. So we think that Zoom H5 is good, but we also tried with lapel mics and stuff, and I think it's also important that if you have what do you call it? Kelvin, what do you call it? The muffler on the mic?
A dead cat.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. So there's two kinds.
There are two kinds for windscreens, right? One's the fluffy, the furry kind.
Okay, if you look at this,
this is
this one.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's just I call it a foam socks for your mic. But if you are recording outdoor, you need to use the furry one, which is literally called
dickhead.
Like it's literally called a dead cat.
Okay. Oh, a dead cat. Sorry, I heard dead cat, and I keep hearing
dead cat. Dead cat.
Yeah.
It's literally called dead cat. What that one? The function for that is to
the wind, right? And
deter the sound of the wind.
Yeah, you'll be surprised how windy Singapore is actually. Yeah, that's what we realized. We picked up a lot of wind.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the best option. But if you want something more subtle, and or if you are using more like a simple lapel mic for your phone, right? At least put on a cover. Yeah.
Yep.
That's the very minimum. That's what we realized, because we made a lot of when I first started doing outdoors recording audio, that's the biggest mistake I made. Like there's a lot of wind, a lot of outside noise. So it's about trying to find the right people and trying to find the right place. Yeah. And so it does require some editing. I have to say, especially if you use your handphone is good enough, but I still feel that if you can get even a cheap mic for your handphone is still better. Yeah,
actually,
so you put it closer. Yeah.
Actually, I do use a Fifine.
I call it a Fifine, but I don't know what's the real pronunciation for it.
But actually, I do use that. In fact, like, because there was this competition, so that I'm kind of in. But anyway, so like I used it to record, and then but what I found out was when I'm editing. So I use Audacity right now. But when I'm editing, it sounds like the sound quality is better when I use my phone. So I don't know if it's because I'm not editing it correctly or
okay. So when it comes to that, there might be a couple of when you are using a Fifine, I'm assuming you plug it into your laptop or your computer.
That's right.
Correct.
Yep.
And Audacity, have you changed any settings? Like, what is your bit rate? Is it 16? Is it 32? What? Okay.
Right. Okay.
That is more advanced. I
bit rate. Okay.
Yeah, your bit rate, what is it recording it? Is it like 44100 or 44800? You basically, your mic has a number of settings that it won't tell you. Okay, you have to set it in the DAW itself when you click record.
The what? Sorry, the DAW.
Yeah, your digital audio, your Audacity, your Audacity.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
thanks. So sorry. So I'm just wondering, right? Which was my kind of like my second or third question. Like, for example, if I want to do all these different things, right? I'm gonna do like, wow, I want to have a guest come on and talk about like these things, and then I still want to go onto the streets and do all these things. So because then realistically speaking, it takes up a lot of time, to do all of this. So that's why I was also wondering, like, say for the length of the podcast, is it better if I just like say, okay, I have a guest, we talk about this, I play a game with my guest, for instance, and then that's it. So I can release probably like maybe once every 2 weeks, or maybe even once a week. Or should I just do like this like whole package of like, oh, have a guest, talk about it, and go out onto the streets, play some games, and then that, right? So
I would say the frequency of how often you release the podcast, that one is really completely up to you. But for the length of your podcast, it depends on your content. If you are doing a street game, for example, right? It can go anywhere up 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But how much time in that 20 minutes, 10, 20 minutes are actually valuable content for you and your audiences out there, right? Let's just say you start an episode with like, this episode revolves around food, okay? You start off the show with food that you can highlight in Singapore. Then you go to the street and you ask people what's your favorite food. And then you end the episode with like, okay, so I have done my rounds. I've asked people, so this is the breakdown of what is Singaporeans' favorite food. Well, let's just say that's your whole episode. I wouldn't recommend you to break down to 3 different segments. I would say just release all 3 into one episode. Into one, because if you do break it down like how you said just now, if you break it down like to like the podcast, the street interview itself, as an audience, you'd be like, what am I listening to? Why is it everywhere? Right? You want to give them a whole package of a whole valuable package of like, this episode I will ask Singaporeans what is their favorite food. All right, and as an audience, I want to know. I don't want to wait 1 week or 2 weeks for like different episodes to come out, right?
Oh, actually, my question is just like, should I then just remove, say, like the whole street portion? Because I know you say that the frequency depends on me, but from the little that I did know, like Googling online and stuff, people were saying like, oh, you need to have a very regular schedule, right? So that people know like when to expect your episodes and whatnot. So but then I know myself, right? At where I am right now, if I want to do the complete, like, wow, the whole thing, I'll probably release an episode realistically, like maybe once every month instead of once a week.
Wait, you are breaking up.
Like, it's a lot of content lah, and so I'm also just hello, hi.
Hello?
Can you guys hear me?
Okay.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Okay, now.
Oh, I'm
now
so
you're back.
sorry. So, okay, I guess so. I was asking, like, instead of having such long episodes that people may not even like finish listening to, and then I'm only doing it once a month, should I just like kind of shorten it, take out the street part, and just release a very simple thing like once every week or
have
every
you
2 weeks?
have you ever thought of vaulting your episodes? What I mean by vaulting your episode is like, instead of like, I'm gonna record today
Got
and
it.
release it to next week, why don't you record, edit, and save at least 4 to 5 episodes, which gives you the time to sit down, record, plan, edit, and then you have at least a month in between to properly release your episode one by one. Unless you're talking about really hot hitting topic like the one you mentioned. What's it called again?
NOC saga.
Yeah, okay, like the NOC saga. It's a very hot topic. You want to get everyone's opinion on it. You want to record today, release it tomorrow, right? If it's not a hot topic, you can always vault your episode. No one's rushing you. Like for now, me and my partner, we have 2 podcasts that are planned since July, and our release window is in January, because it kind of requires us to travel, interview people internationally, and there's a lot of like moving factors in play. But the idea was coined in July. Action was taken in August, and we are still in the midst of like recording, crafting episode, and we are planning to release it in like Q1 or Q2 in 2022, right? So the only person forcing you to like push your episode or the frequency of your episode is yourself, right? What I would suggest you to do is to find some generic topics or like some non time sensitive topics, and just vault it up. Let's just say episode 1 you're talking about some let's just go back to like Singaporeans' favorite food, for example, right? That can be released anytime. And then suddenly the NOC saga came out the second week, right? You can just immediately record and publish it. If it's an urgent episode, if you love your podcast, you would just do it overnight, just push it out, right? And then you have episode 3, 4, 5 that is already in the vault, which gives you 3 extra weeks to plan a new episode, right? So yeah, the only person stressing you out is yourself. I would say start collecting a couple of episodes and put it in the vault. And I would suggest against releasing an episode once a month.
So
you will lose interest very fast. You would pot fade. You won't have the habit of like every week I'm going to do this. You know, you're going to give yourself excuses to like, you know what, I got 2 more weeks to do. I got 1 more week to do, right? What I would suggest is have that habit of what's the word for it?
consistency.
Thank you very much. Consistency. Yeah, have that weekly consistency, so you won't be trapped into this position where it's like, I got 2 more weeks. I got 1 more.
You
week.
lose traction, right?
And then you will just pot fade. You will 1 lose traction, 2 be irrelevant.
Okay. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, but I just want to share a comment by Joe. Joe mentioned that he did his first few podcasts with just his MacBook Pro, internal mic, and a few friends sitting very close to each other, the very DIY hack in a reasonably quiet room, and it works. Yeah, great.
I have to say, Joe, it's a MacBook thing, man. I recorded my first episode on a MacBook as well, and after trying a couple of other laptops, non-MacBook, non-Apple laptop, Apple's stock mic for their phone and their laptop is next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might be, for those who want to get, do on the road recording or the street recording, but low budget. If you have a iPhone, you can actually do without lapel mic, because iPhone, the internal mic is really good from experience. I do a lot of DIY hacks myself, and yeah, so I totally agree. I think we have time for sorry, Joe, what do you want to say?
Sorry,
something?
can I take the last question?
Wait, Joe,
we have time for 2 questions.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll
Joe.
take your question first, then we'll take
Sure.
Joe, and then we finish off with Ding.
Joe,
Ding
before you
Xuan.
go,
Yeah.
Before you go, Ding Xuan,
You want to take her question first?
No, you can because she wants to learn more about the planning on structuring. Send me an email. I will have hold on. Since we're already here, right? Send me an email. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna take me a while to explain to you. So the easiest way for me is just to show you how we do it behind the scenes. Hope that helps. Okay, Joe, let's go.
Yeah. Or yours.
A quick one. In an instance where we invite guests onto the podcast, Kelvin, your advice is there any necessity to do a legal signing of an agreement to release the rights to the publishing of the podcast?
Yes.
I mean, things can get very complicated when there's more than one person, and you never know, you can turn friends to enemy one day. So just that question.
Okay, it's a very, very, very good question. Fortunately, I have never encountered a scenario where the guest would be like, hey, I don't like this episode, take it down. Okay, but try to make it a practice, which I always tell people, try to make it a practice to have a sign-off sheet. You it's not to like sign away their soul, but basically give you the right to release the episode with their voice and have their consent for it. Because once they sign it off, even if they don't like the episode, they can't force you to take it down. Okay. You can.
Do you need to specify content?
What do you mean by specify the content?
This is what we're going to be talking about, and you have
like every legal contract, they try to make it as big as possible, and the reason behind that is just to like, if you start specifying, they can cherry pick what they don't like and be like, hey, you didn't say this one can, this one cannot, right? So just go online and find a sign-off form for like podcasts. Normally is not normally it's them signing off the consent of you using their voice and them agreeing to let you use their voice on your podcast. Right? You don't have to specify like I will be swearing on the podcast, or I will be talking about something sexual on the podcast. No, you don't have to. If usually two parties will come to an agreement of like, hey Joe, I want you on my podcast because I want you to talk about I want to talk to you about A, B, C, D, E. Okay. If you agree on this, just sign this form to give me consent of using your voice. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I highly recommend it from experience. It's better to always have a signed form. But personally, I've actually have guests asking me to take down podcasts before.
Oh,
So
I've never experienced that before.
I think it's a case by case basis, but ultimately it's your own show, right? So for me, I think sometimes what I look at it really depends. One case was for a client, and it was because they interviewed somebody who turned out to be a domestic violence. So the guy was like turned out to be very problematic. It was domestic violence and other things, and so it was a call to you as a host, right? Whether you want to take it down or not, whether you think that this person will represent your brand or tarnish your brand, or maybe you want to give another side to the story, right? So that I think is for you to make your call, but definitely will have, but have taken down for certain reasons, because sometimes it's just better to take it down, especially if you're in Singapore and you're dealing with certain bodies. You know what I mean? Those from you're from Singapore, yeah.
I completely forgot that my network actually took down one entire podcast before.
Yeah.
There were 6 episodes in. There was 2 co-hosts, and later on we found out that one of the hosts was a sexual abuser.
Yeah, something like
Yep, something along the lines of that. He was sexually harassing a number of people lah. We found that out when the girl started to come out and report him. And in the contract itself, we have already a fine print saying that if you have committed any crime or been accused of this and that, we have the rights to take you down. So we just completely put pause on the show. We didn't take it down. We put pause. One, he has came out and kind of admitted that he has done it. We just cancelled the entire show lah. Yeah, and he don't have the right to tell me like, oh, you can't because it's my show. Because in my fine print, I already mentioned that you have to be as clean as possible lah, legally. Yeah.
Yeah.
So long story short, yeah, just have a piece of paper, have a piece of paper for them to give you consent for using their voice. That's all.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that is very important. And also, you're not obliged to, just because you interviewed someone, you're also not obliged to that you must publish the episode. Yeah, because ultimately it's your show and it's your call. Sometimes the guest may not do very well. You have the right not to publish the episode. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have come to almost the very end. We have time for, since everyone is so enthusiastic, right? Okay, I'll just give everyone a chance. Does anyone have any last quick question for Kelvin before we close the session?
I'm very hungry.
Okay, so Kelvin, what's your favorite food? Quick question.
Oh my god. Nasi lemak. Hands down nasi lemak. No, chicken rice. No, wrong answer to ask. Wrong time to ask me this question. but yeah, jokes aside, we do have time for one last question if anyone wants to ask. If not, then Raven will take over.
Last question. Anyone? Don't be shy. You have one of the experts from Malaysia podcasting scene today. Yeah, please do connect with Kelvin. He has kindly share his time and expertise with all of us today. And if you want to connect with him, he has put out his email and the link tree to his podcast, Renegade Radio socials and website. And you can go to his the site or the Spotify links to listen to his podcast as well.
The QR code is the link tree. So
the link tree, okay.
Yeah.
But he has everything, right? He has all the links, right? Because I checked before, you have all the links to your podcast, your company, everything. So do please go and check him out. and listen to his podcast. I think that was some of the best.
If you guys, thank you so
My
much.
personal
We've
favorite was
uploaded.
the Lone Passage. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You want to plug it?
No, not really. I'm not here to plug any of my. I mean, like I kind of did it just for example's sake. But my work email is here, kelvin@rngjarrett.com. I usually don't share this out, but since this is a workshop, everyone here is in that very early stages of starting their podcast. Save my email if you have to. Shoot me a message if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to help you guys out.
Thank you, Kelvin. We really greatly appreciate. So I guess if there's no questions, so yeah, thank you everyone for attending today's workshop on fast track to podcasting. So yeah, if you want to find out more other workshops, you can go to the festival. You can go to the website to check out other workshops, to check out the conference or submit your podcast. So that's it. That's the end of the session. So, but if you can greatly help us, kindly help us fill in the forms, we'll greatly appreciate it. So
here are the QR codes. You can scan it.
So for claims, especially you want your money back, right? Then you must especially fill in the form for the Singapore and the PR. For non-Singaporeans, you can fill in the more general forms. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. So everyone give a clap to our speaker trainer, Kelvin. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Again, my email is out there for you guys. If you need help, just send me a message, please.
Yeah. So we have another event at 2:00 with Nathaniel from Tech in Asia. So I really highly recommend you guys to come by if you can. It's about content strategy. So some of you are talking about structuring and strategy, right? So that would be a great podcast. And he's a very experienced podcaster, and they have run very good podcasts about the tech industry in Singapore and the region. So I really highly recommend take a quick lunch. There's 1 hour and then you come back for it. Okay. Yeah, so if you are done filling the forms, you can leave. Yeah, and get your lunch. And
thank
have
you
a
for
great
everyone's
weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you for everyone's time. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Much,
Really
Kelvin.
appreciate
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.